Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here today for this powerful panel. Ms. Marvel is in all of our communities supporting the BAMEMSA Girls and Gender-Expansive Youth Capacity to Lead. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you, especially with a panel that invokes the spirit of Ms. Marvel. Not sure you could see the poster above my head, but I'm a bit of a fan. But most of all, thank you for grant makers for Girls of Color for allowing us the space to have this critically important conversation. But even more importantly than that, thank you for modeling radical inclusivity, a lesson that we can all take with us after today. My name is Rana Elmir. I'm the program director of the Rise Together Fund, the only donor collaborative in the country that works exclusively to resource and partner with Black, African, Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian organizations to advance our civil rights and fight for full inclusion. We believe, along with our funder partners, grantees, field leaders, that a strong antidote to anti-Muslim bias, to racism, to xenophobia, misogyny, and the white nationalist forces that are at play today is, in fact, a just and inclusive democracy, one with the full participation of our communities. And there lies the rub, the full participation of our communities. Together, we want to ensure that our country's brand of justice does not continue to mean just us, as in just the wealthy, just the powerful, just men, just the privileged, but it means us as in our collective communities and community in the broadest sense, principled and present for one another, where all those who are marginalized and minoritized have the opportunity and importantly, the resources to become organized and to organize, including girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color. Yet we know that the sad reality is that our communities are often targeted. They're constantly being tested by crisis and are consistently underfunded and under-resourced. We're currently working on a study that shows for every $100 spent in social justice-focused philanthropy, a single dollar, $1 goes to BAMEMSA organizations. Add to that for every $1 philanthropy is spending on supporting our communities, at least $5, and that is a gross underestimate, but $5 is being spent by the government and hate groups to target and criminalize us. Yet and still, despite all of these challenges, before the Patriot Act, long after the Muslim and African bans, the BAMEMSA communities have worked together to transform legacies of racism, misogyny, prejudice, and have turned them into our collective power. But who's doing the work? This is not going to come as a surprise to anyone here today, but women, femmes, and gender-expansive leaders constitute 80% of our field leaders and executive directors. They're too often the unsung heroes of our social movements, doing the work, yet rarely getting their flowers. And so just as we're building a just and inclusive democracy, we have to recognize and resource the work, knowing and centering the fact that we're building it with the labor, tenacity, resolve, and on the backs of women, girls, femmes, and gender-expansive leaders of color. So for RTF, our model is to resource the BAMEMSA community, but to do so in such a way that nurtures the leadership and the resilience of women, girls, femmes, and gender-expansive leaders. We can't settle on the hollow victory that we have a seat at the table or a role in our social movements, even if that role is a leadership role. We have to ensure that we're resourcing the movement and ensuring that these leaders have tools and resources to meaningfully break down barriers, to not only survive, but to thrive, and to allow others that come behind us to thrive as well. Because as Sister Melody Capote reminded us yesterday, your words are powerful, your breath is sacred. And so without further delay, I'd like to turn this over to the panel of leaders who could write the book on thriving in and for communities, a panel of leaders that needs all the flowers that you have. So please help me welcome our moderator today, Amirah Fauzi, Program Director of Pillars Fund. Amirah manages a growing portfolio of more than 30 nonprofit organizations, has facilitated the investment of more than $4 million to Muslim leaders, community-based organizations, and creatives who are helping to reimagine our society. Amirah is a visionary whose commitment to our communities, the BAMEMSA communities, is only met by her kindness. Amirah?
Thank you so much, Rana. And I'd also like to thank all the folks who are joining virtually and in person for being here with us too. As Rana mentioned, my name is Amirah, she, her, and I'm a program director at the Pillars Fund, a grant-making institution dedicated to amplifying the leadership, talents, and narratives of Muslims in America. So our grant making takes a two-pronged approach, which Rana alluded to. We invest in organizations and leaders who are rooted in Muslim communities, advancing social good, and we invest in Muslim artists who are creating complex and authentic stories, speaking to our truths. One of our fellowship mentors, Sana Aminette, is an example of a creative reshaping our understanding of who we see as leaders. And I'm mentioning her because she was the creator of Miss Marvel, who is the headliner or referenced in the title of this panel. And for those of you who haven't seen it, Miss Marvel is about a Muslim Pakistani American teenager from New Jersey who loves superheroes. She loves reading their comics. She loves following them on the news. She loves cosplaying them in real life. And one day she finds out that she has superpowers too. And through the show realizes that superheroes look like her and are her too. We are supporting these creatives because if we can change the narratives of our communities so that they work in support of our organizers and activists, we can help them succeed in a more receptive society. As our panelists can also share, who we describe as superheroes shape the relationships that we build, the policies that we support, and who we as funders trust with our grant-making money. The panelists, I'm excited for them to introduce themselves, encapsulate more than just Muslim communities, but BAMEMSA communities. This acronym was created to better capture communities deeply impacted by systemic violence, discrimination, and criminalization in the aftermath of 9/11. We've always believed at Pillars that when we center BAMEMSA communities, we actually solve problems and issues facing larger communities in the United States, and we solve problems for everyone. So I would like our panelists to just introduce themselves now. If you could share your name, your pronouns, your organization, and also just a story about a message you received about your own leadership, I think that might be a great way to kick off how we can reshape and understand and complicate our narratives of who leaders are in our communities and in your communities. Shanaz, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks, Amirah. Hi, everybody. Salams. My name is Shanaz John Muhammad. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the executive director of Queer Crescent. What could be possible? I love thinking about this question. I think what feels possible is the idea of visioning, imagining futures, a place of belonging for all of us, to be creatives, to be affirmed, to be held whole. That ultimately is, I think, a big part of Queer Crescent's vision, is seeding more justice and belonging for all of our communities.
Thank you. Sabrine, your name, pronouns, organization, and a story or message you received about your leadership.
Thank you so much. Salams, everyone. My name is Sabrine Mohammed. I'm with HEART. I'm the health educator and researcher on the team. She, her pronouns. And a message that I recently received, actually was this morning, is trust the process. And it's one of our core values at HEART. I have been in this role since May, and it's been really, the experience has been overwhelming in a lot of aspects, just because of the support that I'm getting from all my team members and people like I've been closely interacting with, like Shanaz and Queer Crescent and other organizations. So part of the messaging that I'm receiving right now in my leadership and in this role is trusting the process, knowing that I'm capable. There's, you know, I have been put in this position for a reason, and just trusting that every challenge and every obstacle that comes along the way, it's not something to kind of dwell about and see it as a defeat, but also it's a lesson in kind of learning how to mitigate that in my own community and among my team. I think that has been one of the most insightful experiences as of recent.
Okay, Sabrine, I'm excited to hear more about how we can continue to foster this environment for you. But first, Suad, can we hear from you? Organization, pronouns, and a story you received or a message you received about your own leadership.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Suad Abdi, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm coming from the organization United Women of East Africa Support Team, so UEAST for short. And a message that I received from my own leadership and just from the work and stuff that I've been doing is that leadership does look like this community, like everybody that's in this space. For a long time, I thought, leaders could only be, stereotypical, white men or things like that. And I never got to see growing up representation or just representation of people who look like me in positions of power or in philanthropic roles. But since I've started doing my work and since I've started working with UEAST and G4GC, I've got to see that, leadership does look like what I look like.
Thank you. I'm loving this energy that's building here. Hithal, your name, pronouns, organizations, and a story or message you received about your own leadership.
Yes, my name is Hethel Jani, and I'm the founder and executive director of SpeakHIRE. My pronouns are she, her. And at SpeakHIRE, we support young people from immigrant families to become future career leaders. And a message about my own leadership is I've been told that I'm a really strong advocate of whatever cause I'm really passionate about. So I really strongly represent the individuals that we serve at SpeakHIRE, and it's because I myself have struggled to find my career pathway. So I think that was a really great message for me to hear, is that I can use my words and my presence to really advocate for these communities that we're serving.
Wow, I love the energy. And I'm also so grateful and happy to hear that y'all have been supported in your leadership and can see and have people supporting you and seeing yourselves as leaders. I want to get to some of the assumptions in larger communities that we all live in and the narratives that we're trying to reshape so that they actually support the work that we're doing in the long run. Shanaz, could you just talk us through why Queer Crescent exists? And I'd love to hear just the space that you offer and why it's necessary for queer Muslims.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what people have shared around leadership. And to me, it also speaks to this value of not aiming for perfection. Perfection really kind of codifies white supremacist notions of leadership. And so the idea that we can come as we are, make mistakes together, grow together, break together is really powerful. Queer Crescent is a project born out of resisting the Muslim and African travel ban with healing-centered organizing. And it is really based on three broad goals: building the narrative power of LGBTQI Muslims, organizing against the criminalization of LGBTQ communities, trans and non-binary folks in particular, and to advance a self-determined Muslim identity. And what I mean by a self-determined Muslim identity is this idea that due to globalized Islamophobia, the war on terror, pervasive imperialist agendas, and a history really of Orientalism, there has been a flattening of many of our communities, Muslims in particular, a flattening that allows for very little nuance, multiplicity. And we know, as this panel reflects, we are very diverse and multilingual, multiracial, multi-sect expression of Muslim communities. And so the idea of a self-determined Muslim identity is we get to determine and we get to name, what does it mean to be Muslims? What are the Muslim values that we want to carry forward that guide our commitments towards upending inequality and injustice? What are our, and I think as queer and trans Muslims, orienting to a self-determined Muslim identity is sometimes our only way in. And so it allows us to move towards, again, a sense of wholeness where we can inhabit all the parts of our identity, our Muslim, our queer, other parts of our identity, and create radical space for generations coming after us to really feel a sense. Like I think about my daughter who's 6 and wanting her to really inherit Muslim communities and cultures that don't leave folks behind.
Thank you. Hetal, can you share more about what immigrant, particularly Muslim, Middle Eastern, and South Asian girls are up against in the model you've created at SpeakHIRE to address some of those barriers?
Yes, definitely. And thank you for sharing that, Shanaz. That was beautiful. If you hear background noise, it's because I'm at a school. So I'll start with our model. We work with young people, and our goal is to really build up their social capital. And again, just let me know if you need me to speak louder. So we want to build up their social capital because what we've noticed and what I've noticed, I identify as South Asian, as Indian. Is that too loud? Oh,
you got it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I identify as South Asian myself, and I've always struggled to find the individuals in my life to guide me and help me continue to pursue a career that I was really passionate about. And I've learned that in the school setting, a lot of the questions don't get asked around what someone wants to do. And there's a drastic shift culturally that isn't understood maybe in a lot of schools. And then these young people go home and they're expected to assume they are living within a different culture. And so your identity being a young Muslim woman, your own wants, your own goals for yourself are not being asked either at the school setting or at home. And so we find that a lot of our young Muslim women come to us, and our whole model, again, is to build social capital. So giving them more than one individual, it's actually 3 individuals, where they can connect those individuals and ask, if I were with my full self, my identity, navigating these multiple cultures in this space, in this school, but I come from this country and this is what my family lifestyle is like. If I want to pursue a career, then what would I need to do and how can I do that? And what I've learned myself is that one person is not going to have all the answers. And so we give them, again, more than one individual so that they can then ask the questions around, how do I, pursue even an internship, or do I need to pursue an internship? How do I stay the course? Because I really want to become financially independent. I really want to make sure that I'm making the right decisions for myself. So these are some of the challenges that we've seen, especially a lot of the breaks that many actually of our Muslim women end up taking, unfortunately, to get married. And so that is very disruptive to their own goals. And so we're doing the work around really supporting them as an ecosystem with nurturing adults who can then, again, even if that is the case for them that they have gotten married and are family planning, they can come back and re-enter the workforce or look at college as a pathway towards a career. So that's the kind of work that we're doing at SpeakHIRE.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to continue diving in a little bit deeper. Suad, I loved hearing about how you've been in spaces and been surrounded by folks really supporting your leadership. And I know that you have also been somebody supporting other leadership as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work at U East and what you're doing with and for girls in your community?
Yeah, so U East is like a nonprofit organization that supports like just a lot of East African Muslims and young girls. It connects us to a lot of opportunities and has, they have multiple programs that I just feel like help us acquire skills that are very essential to our success. And it's really just a place to, sorry for the truck outside, but it's really just a place that's building space for my community. For example, one of the programs that they have there, it's called Me and My Image. And it's a program for like middle schoolers to learn about their identity and learn to love their skin color and learn about bullying and self-care and leadership. And I just feel like it's just something so essential for young Black Muslim girls to feel, especially when so many other places, they feel so outside and different, that it's good to create those kinds of spaces and be feeling true and feel true to yourself and know that it's okay to be different and that you're still beautiful and that you're still, you can still become something despite what people are saying and constantly trying to bring you down. So I do work with some of the young kids there. From time to time, I come in and I visit and I, talk with them and see how they're doing. And it's good to just have somebody that you can look at as a mentor the way that I did when I used to be there. And then I get to now be that for them in some ways. Yeah. That's all.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I keep on saying this, but I'm excited to dive deeper into all of your work and hear more about like the narratives that you're constructing for everyone. Sabrine, I want to hear about like the specific research that Heart did around sexual violence, why y'all have done it, and what has it led to?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Thank you, Saad, for saying wonderful things that your organization is working on. I really want to put things into context for the audience that are joining us virtually. Heart was founded as a direct response to Muslim communities seeking culturally sensitive programming around sexual education and relationships, as well as community members who were experiencing sexual violence in silence, which we know from empirical research out there that directly correlates with the rates of gender-based violence in our communities. So with that, we really needed to understand the needs of our Muslim communities. And we know that, beyond the disclosures that the founders of Heart and the testimonies that we were getting, it's important to recognize that empirical data does serve as a really important function in our culture, specifically in the world of receiving grants in academia and kind of also furthering the work in our communities. So in our research, historically in research, especially sexual violence research, we find that underrepresented communities are often disregarded, overlooked under research. And this really puts in perspective when you are working in the Muslim community. The Muslim community is not a homogenous community. We are multi-ethnic. We come from all walks of life, different racial, gender, sexual identity, sexual expressions. The way we practice is very differently. So with that, we really found that in the research out there, we could not find specifically empirical evidence to support what we were hearing directly from our communities. So we have started several research projects. We started to work with research institutions that are based in Chicago. And one of our research studies that looked at college-aged Muslim students, we discovered that, for instance, rape culture attitudes vary significantly between Muslim men and women. And we found that there has been barriers to facilitating sexual violence programming in college campuses, which leads to kind of oppressive response systems in which a lot of these sexual violence prevention programs on college campuses does not look at the intersectional identities of Muslims that are reaching and trying to utilize those services, and kind of miss the nuances that might, if we have actual sexual violence programs that looks at nuances and culturally sensitive, those campus programs were missing that. So that's where Heart is coming in, educating mainstream campuses, educating mainstream providers on the nuances and how to better really serve the Muslim communities and Muslim college students. Another study that we're hoping to hopefully publish the manuscript is looked at the sexual violence among North American Muslims. And again, we found that the higher the prevalence of sexual violence among Muslims corresponded with the perception of the low risk of sexual violence in our local communities. Again, which goes back to sexual educational programming that are culturally sensitive and culturally aware. And one of our goals is to really expand on that in the upcoming next year, hopefully. All this work, all this research that we have done in the past decade with Heart led to the development and publication of our first book, The Sex Talk, a Muslim Guide for Healthy Relationships, for Healthy Sex and Relationship. This book is phenomenal. I am proud to be part of a team that my colleagues that wrote the book, Shanaz, who gave us a testimony and supported us in this work, all the other phenomenal partners that worked with us. But really, the book is trying to create a way to discuss and talk about what it means to be in a safe, equitable relationship, how to create safe relationships that are based on some of the most important Islamic values and foundations like mercy, equity, and justice. This book is part textbook, part workbook. It allows readers to really reflect, and there are tryout boxes, there are pieces where you as the reader can actually sit down and reflect. And it really, we are trying to have readers kind of go into this journey of self-discovery and discover what it means to be in a safe, equitable relationship that is, fundamentally rooted in your values as a Muslim individual. And hopefully, the book also goes into foundational sexual education that many of us that went through the American education system did not get. Sorry, I am technical difficulties. So yeah, the book kind of dives into that 101 foundational sexual education that we did not get an opportunity to learn as individuals that went through our educational system. So I'm hoping that each individual who reads the book kind of goes into that self-discovery, and we are open to testimonies. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, something that I really want to highlight about what you said and the work that y'all are doing is that Muslim communities in the United States cut across race, gender, age, class, and we are really diverse in terms of the way that we practice. And so when we do our work at Pillars, like we see like the work that our grantees and partner organizations and other Muslim organizations in the field doing as like working on a case study for America, right? Like being able to access such sex education is an issue for larger communities. And so the fact that y'all are finding a way to access sex education and create access points for folks who are struggling with these other marginalized identities and other marginalized barriers could actually help everyone in other religious communities and other communities seeking that same sort of help. So just wanted to reframe that. Also, I am seeing a few questions from the audience enter the chat, and I'm so excited to offer them to the panelists. So keep them coming. Folks at the back end are sending them over. What I really want to bring in, just for the folks here who have really worked on the creation of the gendered Islamophobia framework, I think that's an interesting and important thing to bring up as we do work that's hard in our communities, but also hard when talking about them to non-Muslim communities, like to non-BAMEMSA communities. For Shanaz, Sabrine, but also like Suad, Hitel, if you want to join in too, like, could you share a little bit more about the gendered Islamophobia framework and what it offers us in terms of understanding organizing in Muslim, Arab, Middle Eastern, and South Asian communities?
Sabrine, I can kick us off and then please, I'll toss to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I say this because Sabrine and I were part of a broader working group called Muslim Abolitionist Futures. So, thinking about the gendered Islamophobia framework, it's really important, I think, to lift up the Rakshan Raja of Muslims for Just Futures, Heart and Vigilant Love for developing this framework. They put together a report that's really important. Hopefully we can chat it in a couple of years ago, and Queer Crescent was invited to collaborate. And for Queer Crescent as a queer feminist-led organization, this framework resonated deeply and built upon insight and others who have articulated the ways that gendered violence is upheld by the state in systems and in infrastructure designed to disempower Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks of color, LGBTQI, and disabled communities, which then gets reproduced on the queer body. Gendered Islamophobia weaves in the unique and continuous criminalization of Muslims and the double binds we often find ourselves in, organizing towards the cultural change, towards deeper care, inclusion, and a gender justice framework, while simultaneously calling out Islamophobia that we're all swimming within. And so it really understands the gendered violence, and Darshan Raja came to this kind of framework. She coined the term gender Islamophobia through years of research and working with survivor advocates and working within the domestic and sexual violence movement and organizational spaces, and would hear the ways in which Muslim folks were at the intersections of feeling the imposition of state violence and then not being supported and held in the ways that Sabrine was just articulating that Heart really works on. And we see that being reproduced in so many different systems: reproductive justice, access to adequate mental health. It's both the subtle and the very loud ways in which gender violence continues to get reproduced, and that Muslim folks, femmes, non-binary, gender-expansive folks, are really burdened with unpacking so much of that. And so to shore up communities with not just frameworks, but interventions to really address the multiple ways that these oppressions are impacting the body is some of the work that we work to do in coalition. Sabrina, I'll toss it to you or to others who want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shanaz. But I mean, you've really summed up what the idea of gender Islamophobia is. I just want to really emphasize that, you know, the systems of oppression really does create and foster an environment that's really harmful to Muslims, those Muslim women, femmes, gender-expansive individuals, because, you know, starting with the state violence, starting with violence that we are experiencing in institutions, a lot of our communities are really experiencing gender violence by all, you know, whether state agencies or intra-community abuses, such as like sexual assault, domestic and family violence, trafficking, harassment, and abuse. And these are all really rooted in power and privilege, and also intersect with a heteronormative communities and society that is fundamentally, you know, founded on patriarchy and white supremacy and slavery and, you know, indigenous genocide. So all these systems of oppression really are the foundations of what we are experiencing today with state violence and police violence and sanctions on bodily autonomy. Prime example, what happened this summer. So I just want to leave us in this space in understanding that this is just bigger than the work we're doing as a collective, as a coalition, and we always want value. We always want support from our community members and like other organizers to kind of lead this analysis with us and kind of, you know, make sure that this analysis really reaches mainstream American society in order to kind of do some of the work of preventing this crippling state violence that individuals of racial minorities are experiencing, but also as Muslims who are women, femmes, and gender-expansive individuals. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I really encourage everyone on this call to just look up the Partnership to End Gendered Islamophobia's community report. The ways in which Muslim communities, the BAMEMSA communities, have been navigating and finding solutions to like larger issues in the context of larger Islamophobia is honestly like the solution building, I think, could be carried in any field. I want to bring it back to fellow funders in the space. Shout out to you. Hital, like I'd love to hear what narratives you faced when talking to fellow funders. Like what are your experiences and what narratives do you want us to look into, to like begin to think about, to begin to really lean into in order to better support your work?
Yeah, I think so that's a big question. There's been, so as a founder, I've had to, and I'm a first-time founder of a nonprofit, so I thought the fundraising was just going to be there. Like this is a great solution. I mean, we were originally primarily focused on young women, and I just felt that, I see these amazing young women who really want to pursue careers, really want to pursue life goals, and this was a great cause and the community was going to band around it. That wasn't the case. Raising money for the organization initially and even to this day still becomes a challenge unless I can speak closely with a possible funder. And the challenge is that what funders see on the outside is that there's not really a problem. And, young women often are seen, I'll speak from my perspective as from myself as well, and the young women we serve, that they're often seen as just, they're obedient and they're following along and they get good grades. And so there's not actually a problem here that needs investment because they're going to be okay. And no one's asking the question I mentioned originally in my intro of what we do, that there is a disconnect between school and home. And so if these young women are not getting, or if these individuals are not getting the question or being asked the question of what they want to do, neither at school or at home, then how are they supposed to explore what their opportunity, what they actually want to pursue? And so that was a conversation for 3 years, and it was actually until I met Maheen at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, where I was able to voice that and say, I've been struggling because I know that there's this population of students who really wants to pursue career goals, who really wants to understand what their next step is, but no one is getting on a call with me for me to explain why this is worth the investment, because they just see a population of students who are okay and they are going to be okay. And the struggle is just not there. And so it doesn't deserve funding. And it was that conversation where I was able to just kind of realize that I need to be more vocal about the challenges that these young women are facing, that these students are facing. And that is, again, that they, for so many of them in between our programming, which runs an academic year, so many of them are being sent to their home countries. They get married, family planning is kind of forced upon them, and they come back and they voice to us initially. A lot of our programming, while we do get parent consent, it happens with the support of the school, because we've learned that at home, these kinds of conversations around career, or the time wasn't being made, or they weren't allowed the time at home to really pursue in these conversations. And so we do this in partnership with schools, and but no one's asking them at schools what they want to do. And no one's really figuring out where they went when they went home, or what happened when they went home. And all of a sudden they're coming back and their grades are okay, but they're not what they used to be because they've lost a lot of motivation. What's the point of me doing this if this is my situation anyway? And so I think part of what, as being an advocate for this, for this population, I really want people to know that they're strong, they're capable, they're worth our investment. There's so much that they can do, and if we see them and we give them the tools for them to succeed, they're going to thrive in the careers that they choose. And we need to help them understand how to navigate the cultural differences that they experience, and they need to understand how to navigate the conversations in different social contexts that they're in. And they hold multicultural identities, and they have to be equipped to work through both of those, or through, however many they identify with. So I think I want investors, and I want philanthropists, and I want funders to know that there's a population of students, there's a population that really is deserving of your investment, because a little goes a long way. We heard in the beginning it was $1, which is it's just not enough. But if that was made to $5, imagine what can happen when these young people are already so motivated to do so much. I don't know if that completely answered the question, but it's been a struggle. I'll say as a funder, it's been a struggle to kind of not lead with the problem, and really kind of just say these young women are this population is just deserving of your investment.
No, it's also, I hear that, and I love the tension that you're feeling around really wanting to center solutions and joy and the possibilities when you're struggling with facing narratives that do not align with the reality of the communities that you center, correct? Saad, I want to hear from you again, as somebody who has been a part of G4GC as well as U East. I kind of want to hear about your experiences in philanthropy too, especially as a younger person. What does philanthropy mean to you? And where do you see yourselves? Where do you see yourself in this work? Oh, we may have lost Suad. That's okay. I will ask her the question when she comes back. I'm gonna just go ahead and ask I want to make space for this question that came in a little bit earlier. And then when I see Suad's face, I'll bring it back. Oh, wait, here she is. Suad, did you hear the question that I just asked, or should I repeat it for you and the audience?
I think it just dropped me out of the call for a second, but can you repeat that for me, please?
Yes.
I didn't catch the question.
No. I'm happy that you're back with us, and I'm excited for everyone to hear from you again. You've helped shape philanthropy in your own ways, and you've also talked about being in spaces that really support your leadership. I kind of want to hear from you, especially as like a younger person. What does philanthropy mean to you, especially in your communities, and where do you see yourself in this work?
Yeah, so I'm really grateful to G4GC for giving me like so many experiences and getting to really see or really just think about philanthropy on like a deeper level. One thing that's really stuck with me with the work that they've done is they mentioned how philanthropy doesn't always look like just here's funding and that's it. It can be in our own communities when we are helping our neighbors or when we're helping each other, when we're coming together as a collective to support each other. And it doesn't have to just be, you know, the stereotypical picture of what philanthropy looks like. There was a second portion to the question that I want to get to.
Yeah, like where you kind of touched on it and being a part of like shaping philanthropy with G4GC, but like where do you see yourself in this work?
Yeah, I really want to be in this work. I really want to be an advocate for my community and for people who are underrepresented in philanthropy. I want them to know that, you know, people like what Hatel was saying. Did I say, I don't want to say your name wrong, Hatel. Yeah. That, you know, these communities are people that we should be funding and should be caring about and should be trying to support. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I love the narrative, but it's also just an invitation that like from what Hatel was saying, like funders need to do a better job. We need to do a better job of understanding the communities we're trying to reach, but also, Suad, I think your experiences speak to the fact that we can actually bring these communities into our funding processes, right? I think participatory grant making is a way to do it. Also happy to talk about like iterating ways of participatory grant making, but like I think our panelists are people who are open to being a part of philanthropic processes as well, and great resources of information and translating that information for different audiences too. I think just touching on a larger thing happening in the world and that the media and narratives are being created and shaped around. Shanaz and Sabrina, you guys touched on gendered Islamophobia and the ways that that narrative can like become pervasive into larger things happening in the world. Miss Marvel, throwing it back to the title of the panel, is an example of narrative content and work that amplifies the capacity of BAMEMSA girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth to lead. Earlier in the conference, we heard from Fatima Asghar, poet and novelist. And just thinking about what's happening right now in the news, there is a lot of attention, particularly in Western media, about the hijab and women and girls activism as related to what is happening in Iran. What narratives do you guys feel are important to amplify in order to continue to elevate and support the joy, safety, and leadership of BAMEMSA girls, femmes, and gender-expansive people in your communities, given these larger narratives at hand? And what are the narratives that y'all want to combat? I'm gonna let this sink in a little bit. Oh, Sabrina, you unmuted.
I mean, I can start, and anyone who wants to follow can follow. But I think I just want to go back to the idea of gendered Islamophobia, just because that really provides us the foundation that what we see so prevalent in mainstream media and mainstream Western societies, specifically tying into the United States, mainstream American culture, is that Muslim women, femmes, are oppressed and do not have the agency to kind of lead lives that are full of choices and individual self-determination. And I think in this space, I really want to tying it back to what's going on globally. And you can't have this conversation without tying it to global Islamophobia and global gendered Islamophobia. I think what's going on in Iran, it's a great example of when young people decide to kind of, hey, we are ready to practice self-determination. We're ready to practice how we see our faith, how we see agency according to our own terms, and we are ready to make decisions that are full of choices and self-autonomy and self-liberation. But I really want to also combat the idea that because that is going on, that does not mean that other Muslim women and femmes do not have are oppressed, do not have these self-liberation ideologies, because I choose to represent myself in a certain way, right? I choose to practice a religion in a way that identifies with me as an individual. Women does not mean that I am, does not mean that we're taking away from the larger movement that's going on in Iran, for example, or the larger movement that's going on here in North America, where a lot of Muslim communities, queer Muslims, femmes, trans Muslims are figuring out ways to kind of be self-determinant and show the world who they are through their lenses and how they identify with their faith. So this might be like a long circle of what I'm trying to say, but all I'm trying to say is what is going on globally does impact us here. And the way that you see those narratives are being, shown, I just also want us to consider that the celebration of what's going on in Iran today has a lot of neglects the consequences of the larger US imperialism and colonialism and what's going on in the rest of the world, and what Black and Brown and Indigenous people have experienced for centuries when it comes to taking powers from them, and the fact that, we started war. I don't want to speak, but like there has been wars that waged on countries because of, and yeah, so I will stop here.
No.
Continue,
I want to reframe too, but first, before I bring us back, like, do any other panelists want to like speak to narratives that you want to really like highlight as like larger narratives about BAMEMSA communities are created through like global conflict?
I would love to. Yeah, I think I love the pieces that you were lifting up, Sabrine, and particularly locating. I think Islamophobia creates such a sensationalization of Muslim experiences. And when we look about what's happening in Iran right now, this is another example of the, white supremacist, ultranationalist, right-wing fascist who are attacking bodily autonomy. And when we look at, to Sabrine's point, the hijab is not necessarily a symbol around the oppression of Islam as much as it has become a symbol of state violence. And so context really matters, right? Like when we look at Iran, people uprising are resisting state violence, not unlike the ways in which communities here in the US are also resisting the criminalization, the continued imprisonment and criminalization of Black and Brown bodies, the disappearance of Indigenous folks. And so to be able to see that those links are really important, and then to also situate ourselves, right? Like the US has contributed to decades of sanctions against Iran. And this has produced the conditions that have impacted people's daily life and struggle, their poverty, the joblessness, the COVID response. And so we have to also interrogate our positionality as internationalists, as we relate and look at Iran, like what is our responsibility? How much are we actually talking about sanctions and our culpability in that environment? Look at Afghanistan and Iraq. These are also countries that experienced decades of divestment that had detrimental effect. And it is through this imposed imperialist imposition that then creates this like very vulnerable condition for ultra conservatives and right wingers to kind of grab for power, right? And so I think being able to really understand the powers at play and how the hijab is so easily such a compelling tool to distract what is actually happening. What's happening is state violence, and we need to be explicit and clear in that articulation.
Thank you. Yeah, I love bringing it back to just questioning like whose side has the US actually been on for years and years and years beforehand, but also the contextualization that the hijab means something different to like different folks within different communities and different countries. As somebody who's Indonesian, the hijab past our previous dictator actually was a source of liberation as a signifier and a symbol. And it really is like dependent on the country. And I want to make sure that narratives of liberation in another state do not fully inform or like impact or expand upon Islamophobia as like girls, femmes, and gender expansive Muslims here in the United States are also searching for and seeking liberation and freedom from state violence. Okay, we have 9 minutes left. And Shania, since I already have you on mute, I want to make sure that we ask this question, but I also want to throw it to the rest of the panelists too. The question from the audience is, do you have any offerings or advice for queer and trans Muslims who are struggling to find oneness in the intersection of their identities, navigating language and culture and spirituality? And after I offer this to Shinaz, I'd also love to hear from other panelists about like how you all are creating space for queer and trans Muslims who are struggling to find oneness in their identities. But first, Shinaz, as I'm the ED of Queer Crescent, I'll give you the floor.
I love the question. I love the invitation for everyone to think about this question as well, because I think that's part of it is like, how are we changing the cultures to where it's not just queer organization and queer-led folks who are responsible for responding to this question. So thank you, Amirah. Find your people. Find your people, you know, which can be really hard because a lot of us are pushed underground. We experience community push out. And there's so much grief in not feeling connected with communities of origin and family of origins. And so finding your people. And I think for me, it's been quite, it's a journey, you know, but it's been quite liberating to no longer feel like I have to reconcile identities, because I think that's often a framework that's put on us. How do you reconcile these identities? And when I think about reconciliation, to me, that's like externally facing, asking me to kind of respond to other people's articulation of what it means to be Muslim. I'm also Shia Muslim, so I grew up with this, with very early training around what does it mean to not be included, right? Because of the ways in which Sunni kind of predominant, Sunni supremacy culture kind of predominates Muslim communities and systems and materials, really. And so from a very early age, I had no illusion of being included. So I think that has really given me a lot of grounding and training, and where I had to work to articulate myself, I had to affirm myself, and I had to find my people that were affirming me. And we don't have to get down with all of our identities. We don't have to be the same, but at least I need to feel dignity. I need to feel care, and we deserve to feel a sense of belonging. And so my wish for you is to find that.
My God, you're like gonna bring me to tears. For the other panelists, how are you and your organizations allowing space for queer and trans Muslims and BAMEMSA folks who are struggling to find oneness in their intersecting identities?
I can go. As Heart, we are really, really intentional that with our work, we are reaching the most impacted Muslims. And I really want to bring in that intersectionality into this space, is that, you know, we are queer inclusive, and, you know, we're fortunate to have an organization like Queer Crescent as one of our partners in this space, kind of providing us with the analysis that we need to to make sure that our work is inclusive and reaches the most impacted Muslims that we often work with and we often receive a lot of disclosures from. So in our work, we are really intentional to, hearing from our partners like Crescent, but also collaborating and kind of making sure that the space, again, is not Sunni Muslim supremacist in a sense, that we have other Muslim voices that are constantly providing us with analysis and constantly providing us with their leadership. So yeah, I think that's how Heart is really trying to intentionally do this work. We could do more, and we are always striving to be in a space where our staff is equipped with the language that we need and the analysis and the frameworks to respond to what's going on in our Muslim community, especially with the most impacted Muslim community members. In this space happens to be a lot of Muslim and a lot of queer Muslims, femmes, and trans identifying Muslims. So yeah.
Yeah, I can share that. I mean, similar to what Sabrina said, I know that we can also be doing more, but it's the partnerships that we make to make sure that we're being inclusive. And our model of leveraging social capital or creating or forging that social capital, those relationships with individuals, as Shanaz said, find your people. That's kind of our goal. So when we do match in our program, we match young people to professionals. We really think about how these young people identify themselves, and it's a very lengthy application for us that we're working on, but we really want to get to know who they are and how they define themselves to then be able to find the right matches for them with individuals. Because I know that when I first started doing this work, I thought as a South Asian woman, as an Indian woman, I would be doing work that I can understand directly. But I know that, the struggles that I face, other communities face as well, but I may not be able to speak to them as expertly as I can maybe to someone who holds my identity or closer to my identity. And so, that's kind of our model is we may not have all the answers, but we can find you the individuals who may have more answers. And again, multiple individuals who may have more answers. So build your social capital, build that network and find your community. And I think as organizations, even here as well, we'd love to do more work with all the organizations, and we're partnering with Heart to make sure that we're doing work that is responsive, culturally responsive for we're piloting in a school. So I think the connections we're making here and the community that we're building as organizations, and then also the individuals finding their community. And we're looking to always support that development.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for just your offerings with that question. That was so generously shared. I'm going to do a time check. So we have 2 minutes left for this session, but I've been given a heads up from G4GC that I can go over a few minutes. So if the audience would like to join me on this journey, I would love to ask just every panelist this one last question, which is, what is one thing you want philanthropy to stop doing or start doing in order to better support BAMEMSA girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color? I'd encourage you guys to be bold here, because bold advice is good advice, and something that we can hold forth and take to our teams and our people. Can we start with Suad? What is one thing you want philanthropy to stop doing or start doing in order to better support BAMEMSA girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color?
Include them in your work. Whether that's going to your local mosque or any nonprofit organizations and trying to look for these youth and seek them out and ask them what they want to do with the funding, or just really seeking out these communities to ensure that you're including them in these discussions, and it's not just you blindly thinking that you're helping when you're not really getting their input. So include them in their work, include them in your work, include them in your work, include them in your work.
Also love the reframe. Hetal, what is one thing that you want philanthropy to stop doing or start doing in order to better support BAMEMSA girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color?
Yeah, I would love philanthropy to stop with the assumptions that you know, what they see or what they know is everything. And just because they don't see a struggle, just because they don't recognize or understand the struggle, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But more so, I would really love people to stop philanthropy as a way to just kind of put out the fire, and instead invest in communities, to strengthen communities rather than just, again, putting out the fire or solve a problem. So I've been asked multiple times to share the struggles of individuals, and I've struggled with that myself, because I want to instead portray young people as the leaders that they are, with the strengths that they have. And philanthropists can see that and say, you know what, if we put in extra investment right here, if this person's doing this much with this little, then imagine where they're going to go if they have more. So don't assume that just because you don't see a struggle, it doesn't exist. And don't look for a struggle just so that you can make your investment. Really start investing in the strengths.
I love that. I love also just allowing our grantees and applicants and other folks in the community to really focus their energy on like the abundance and visions for their futures. Shanaz, one thing that you want philanthropy to stop doing or start doing in order to better support BAMEMSA, girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color?
Trust us. Trust us that we, our commitments are real, our connections to communities are real, our solutions need resources. And so to really trust and follow our lead, to partner with us to move those resources, and to, you know, reflect on the ways that you might be contributing to that flattening of our experiences. Like, for example, Queer Crescent is not a faith-based organization. And so oftentimes some of the things I have to do when I meet with new philanthropic partners is to really articulate kind of like, there's many different ways that people can be coming into their Muslim identities, one of which is like politicized, racialized. It's not just faith-based work. And so to join us in that cultural change and to kind of breathe in more breath into what it means to be a Muslim.
Thank you. I love the call. And Sabrine, what is one thing that you want philanthropy to stop doing or start doing in order to better support BAMEMSA, girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth of color?
I mean, plus one to what Saad, Hidal, and Shanaz have shared. I just want to go back to the idea of the struggles. I hope that with this space that, you know, our struggles are not a storyline for anybody. Our community struggles are not storylines for anybody. And it's not a cheap shot for our organizations to get funding. So I hope that in the future with philanthropy and funding, that like retelling those narratives and retelling those storylines can be harmful. So I hope that like Shanaz stated, that trust us. We have been doing this work. Our organizations have been doing this work, and trust us and let us lead this process and join us in this journey, become a partner with us.
Yes. Okay. I love these last things. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that you heard what was being said and part of this panel. I also just want to like emphasize this last notion of include BAMEMSA communities in your work. They're at the heart of so many of these larger issues facing the United States and also our communities globally. And trust our communities who are doing this work too. Looking forward to connecting with more audience members and panelists after this, but thank you all for joining us. And thank you all for learning with us.